Okay. To continue here, pardon me. Okay, so we are doing, so hello everybody, welcome to our cooking live session. Don't forget that next week we have another one. If you have little ones, next week's is in the afternoon and it's meant to be done as a family. Children and adults can cook together. It'll be a nice and simple recipe. But for today, we are cooking two recipes. The first that we're going to get started on right away, I have my printouts here, is the fresh mozzarella and tomato salad. So the first thing we're going to do is mix our dressing ingredients together. So for that, we're going to have a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, 1/4 cup of olive oil. We have an onion, garlic, which I'm going to grab from my refrigerator in just a second, fresh basil, dried oregano. Now, this recipe didn't call for any salt and pepper, so I am going to probably add some salt. I typically like to throw in salt for tomato-based dishes. You do not have to if you want to strictly follow the recipe, or if you like to reduce your sodium, feel free to leave that out. So 1 second, I'm going to grab my garlic. Okay, so 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar is going to be our first step. That is not balsamic vinegar, that is olive oil. Okay, there's our balsamic vinegar and a 1/4 cup extra virgin olive oil. Okay. And then it calls for a tablespoon of onion mince. So it calls for, I think you could probably use dried onion or onion powder if you prefer. I'm just going to use some fresh onion here. So I'll end up using the rest of this later for something else, surely. So I'm just going to dice up a small amount of onion here. Whoop. And I think we're going to want this pretty finely diced, so I'm going to go back in and just, that is probably more than enough, yeah. And if you want to be more precise than I am, feel free. I'm just sort of eyeballing things with the liquid ingredients. I'm going to be more exact, but with the onion and garlic, I'm just going to kind of freehand it here. And we're doing this first because we can just keep this covered in our refrigerators, chilling while the rest of our meal is cooking. Looks pretty nicely minced to me. Okay, so I'm going to throw that in there. Wipe down my cutting board as I go. So pardon me if I disappear for a second here and there. Otherwise, my kitchen becomes a disaster if I don't clean as I go. Okay, so we've got our onion. Next, we have a tablespoon of fresh basil mince. Now, so this salad doesn't call for any greens other than the basil. So I am going to probably add more than that because I like it. But again, if you want to be a purist about the recipe, then feel free to just add a tablespoon. So this isn't like a traditional salad. It's mainly a tomato salad. It's a nice little side here. Like I said, I like a lot of basil, so I'm going to add some extra here. I rinsed this earlier, so feel free to rinse if you have not. Okay. And so for this, we're just slicing it up. This recipe isn't exact. It just says fresh basil mince, so I'm just going to roll it up and slice it kind of finely. It's usually nice to have in ribbons, so I just sort of roll it up like that. So this is going in the dressing. So I think I'm going to just do like a small amount for the actual dressing, and then I'm going to slice up more to mix in with the tomatoes. So you can leave that part out of it if you prefer. My tomatoes are going to go in here, so I'm just going to throw these in. A little bit big there. Okay, that'll probably, well, I'll just do this last bit. And then the last thing is going to be our garlic. The recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic for the dressing. Now, usually when I add garlic, I usually end up adding way more than recipes call for, but since this is for a dressing, I think I'm going to stick with just the 1 clove. I have these already peeled garlic because they make life easier. And actually, so feel free to mince if you want with a knife. Whenever I am adding garlic to a dressing, I like to just grate it in because it makes it a little easier for me. And I don't really want huge chunks of garlic that aren't cooked. So if you have a grater, then that can work. And here's where I'm going to throw a little bit of salt in. So just going to eyeball it here. I'd say this is probably like half a teaspoon of salt that I'm throwing in. And then I'm going to mix that together. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to slice up my tomatoes. It doesn't specify, so you can do them in really however you want. It just calls for sliced tomatoes. I'm trying to think. I'm not going to dice them. These I already rinsed earlier. Again. Okay, so these are sliced, and then, yeah, I think I'll just put them in like that. I was going to cut them up more, but I don't think I'm going to. You can cut them up further as you're eating if you want, or you can dice them up more if you would like that as well. It says 4 to 6 tomatoes, so kind of however many you want in there. Mine happened to come with, I think, 5 tomatoes, just came with my package. I think I need to sharpen my knife. Okay. And so I'm cooking for 4 that include my children. They're probably not going to eat this. So I believe it said you can keep this refrigerated for 24 hours. So the adults will probably, I don't know, my oldest might eat this, but my youngest is not going to eat it. So there will probably be some leftovers. So if you have some, you can keep this in your refrigerator up to 24 hours. So there's that. And then all we're doing is covering this with the dressing. I'm going to give that another little mix. Oh, and we're going to throw the, almost forgot the mozzarella. So I have this fresh mozzarella that I'm going to dice up. It calls for 2 ounces. This is, I'm going to cut this over here because it's kind of in liquid. So usually when you open these up, they're a bit liquidy. Pardon me while I disappear for a second. Okay. So this came in an 8-ounce package, so I'm just going to quarter it and save the rest. I have a bowl ready to go over there. I'm going to kind of cube this. You just want kind of bite-sized pieces, really. You don't want huge chunks of this. Have somebody waiting, pardon me. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give my dressing another little stir here. Just pouring that on. Okay, I'm just going to give that a mix. And then that can just sort of marinate and hang out in our refrigerators, and then you can just serve that as a side once the rest of the meal is ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the fridge. I'm going to do some minor cleanup here. So one moment. Okay, done with all this. Okay, I'm going to give my cutting board and my knife a quick little rinse here. So pardon me, I'm going to mute myself so you just don't hear my sink blasting. 1 second. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our pasta, the water for our pasta boiling. So you know what I forgot? I forgot oregano. I'm sorry about that. I knew I was forgetting something. That called for a 1/4 teaspoon of oregano. So really, I'm just going to give a little sprinkling. If you forgot as well, or if you're better than I am and you were following along with the recipe, feel free. But I'm just going to sprinkle this on top and give it a mix, and I'm sure it will be fine. Not ideal, but it is what it is. So pardon me 1 second. Okay, so that should be fine. Okay, so I'm gonna get my pot filled with water for our pasta. Pardon me while I get that going. Okay, and then I was always taught that you want your pasta water to be as salty as the sea. So I'm going to throw in a liberal sprinkling of salt in there, put it on the stove on high heat and get that boiling. All right, and I'm also grabbing my chicken. Now, again, this recipe didn't call for much in the way of seasoning. It didn't call for any seasoning of the chicken, which is just not okay with me. So I'm gonna season my chicken with a little bit of salt. I'm gonna go really easy on the salt because this recipe calls for pesto. Depending on what pesto you're using, I use this jarred pesto from Trader Joe's, and it is very salty. So I'm gonna be very cautious with the salt on my chicken. I'm also gonna throw some garlic powder and some pepper on there. So feel free to season your chicken as you see fit. Okay, and then the first thing we're gonna do is start cooking our chicken. So I'm gonna take you with me, pardon me, don't get motion sick here. Take you over to my stove area here. I hope you can see me okay. I think so. Okay, so I'm turning my heat on to medium. I'm gonna grab the chicken. And my olive oil. I'm gonna let that heat up a little bit. And the only other thing we need to do actually, I'm sorry. So this needs to heat up a little bit. Our stove needs to heat. Our pans need to heat. So I'm gonna take you back over here and we're gonna chop up our asparagus. So it calls for a cup of asparagus. And then it doesn't specify to whether or not we're doing anything with the cherry tomatoes. So I think we're just gonna leave those whole. And then as they cook, they'll just cook down. Okay, so this is calling for a cup of chopped asparagus. And there's my knife. I'm just gonna cut off some of these. These are pretty good looking asparagus, but I still like to chop off the ends. They can be, when you get these sort of woody looking ends here, they can be a little more tough. So I like to chop those off. And I'm just, again, it's not specifying, so I'm just guessing. I'm just kind of doing them in these like sort of bite-sized pieces. And these are this is really thin asparagus that I got here. So it calls for a cup. I like asparagus quite a bit, so I'm probably going to end up doing a little more than a cup, but I'm trying to get an idea here. Yeah, I'm going to do a little more here. Again, chopping those ends off. Okay, and my asparagus will be ready to go. So we're gonna cook the chicken. I think we're ready to head over to the stove this time. All right, pardon me. If you can't see me or anything like that, let me know. That feels pretty good. Just doing enough olive oil to coat my pan to cook my chicken. So the side that I seasoned, I'm just going to use my left hand to touch my chicken. I could probably let that heat up just a little bit more. I'm going to be patient. And usually I would just kind of go and cook my chicken, even though my pan's not hot enough, but I'm going to choose patience. So here's a good moment to, if you need to pre-measure anything else out, if you would like I got my, it calls for a half a cup of Parmesan cheese, but it's going to be divided. So a quarter cup is going to go into the sauce while we're cooking, and a quarter cup is going to go on top after it's done cooking. So this is a good moment to measure any of that out, or get your pesto ready. That's going to be, I think, a half a cup of pesto. And then we're going to need 8 ounces of cream cheese and a tablespoon of butter. And let's see. So normally I would throw in some fresh garlic into a dish like that, even though it's not called for in the recipe, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I do have that fresh garlic in the dressing of the tomatoes, and I do have some garlic powder on the chicken. So I'm going to try to temper my garlic impulses and just, I'm not going to throw any extra in there. But if you would like to, feel free, because I'm always a sucker for fresh garlic, and adding some would probably be really good sauteed in here. Other things you can throw in later are, of course, crushed red pepper is really good. And again, I'm cooking for kids, so if it were just me, I would be putting probably a lot of crushed red pepper in there. But since my kids are going to be eating this with me, I'm probably just going to put some on top of my own personalized dish, which isn't as good as when it's cooked in, but it is what it is. Okay, so this is still not quite as hot as I'd prefer, but I'm just going to go for it. So I'm going to use my left hand so that I can season the other side of the chicken with my right hand. Okay. And these are really, really thin chicken tenders, so they're not going to take a super long time to cook. And hopefully you have a big pan for this, because you don't want to, if you can avoid crowding your chicken and having all the pieces touch, you'll get a better result. Okay, so I'm just going to lightly season the other side. And I'm going to wash my hand because I need 2 hands for this pepper grinder. So hold on, let me get the chicken off of my hand. One moment. Okay, my water is not boiling yet for my pasta, so I'm just letting that, keeping an eye on that. I'm going to add some pepper to the side. Okay. I think I'm getting performance anxiety here because I really should have just let my chicken's not sizzling. The pan's hot. I should have let that heat up more. I knew that. That's okay. So, and I think this is a pretty forgiving dish. This chicken is going to get coated with a sauce and everything. So it's not as important if to be like perfectly seared or anything like that as if we were, you know, cooking like a nice chicken breast or something. This is going to be covered in a sauce and tossed with some pasta. So it's a pretty forgiving dish, I think. So for now, we're just letting that cook. I'm going to grab my other stuff that I'm going to throw in. Okay, so I have my asparagus ready to go, and then this calls for a cup of cherry tomatoes. I did not rinse my tomatoes, so I'm going to do that right now. Now my package of tomatoes just came in a 10-ounce. I'm not going to measure it out. It's hard, you know, especially with round objects like that. It's kind of hard. I love tomato. I think this is going to be really nice with all the sauce and everything. So I'm going to kind of throw a bit of a lot in there, but feel free to be precise with your measurements if you prefer. Okay. Looks like I hear my chicken sizzling a little bit, so I forgive myself for my earlier rushing. And the other thing that you can do, which I think I'm going to do, is I'm going to cut, since I have so much of that fresh basil left over from the tomato salad, I think I'm going to slice up a little bit of extra basil and sort of mince it up really finely and throw it in the sauce as well. Toward the end, I mean, we do have the basil, of course, in the pesto, but I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of fresh basil on the top. So feel free to slice a bit of that up if you would like to do the same. So I'm going to do that while my chicken, oh, I can turn my sink off, can't I? So I'm just gonna, I'm over here on the other side of the kitchen, slicing up a little bit of fresh basil to sort of garnish at the end. So if you can't see me for a second, I'm not gonna make us all dizzy by moving my camera again, but I'm gonna do that. That's what I'm over here doing, slicing up a little bit of fresh basil. I'm just doing like thin ribbons of it. And that's gonna go on top toward the end. Okay, and I'm also gonna get I think we're removing the chicken, yeah. So we're gonna use the same pan to cook the sauce and the veggies. So I'm gonna get a plate ready for my chicken to go on when it's done cooking. Get some butter. So it just calls for a tablespoon of butter to saute the asparagus in, and you'll have some, I think, leftover bits from the chicken and some leftover oil, but I don't think that'll be a problem. Usually cooking things in butter and oil together works. My pasta water is still not boiling. So the recipe called for 3 cups of uncooked penne. I'm just going to use the whole, I got a 1 pound package of penne that I'm just going to throw in. Because whenever I have little bags of leftover pasta, it never works. And I'm very thirsty, so I'm going to get some water here. Oh, okay, so my pasta water is boiling. Gonna throw my pasta in. Yeah, I just did the whole 1 pound bag of pasta here. I'm gonna get my colander ready for when that is done cooking. I really, really can't stand overcooked pasta. I'm a big fan of the al dente, so I like to get everything ready so I can just dump that when it's time to go. Now, once our chicken is cooked, I think everything's going to move pretty quickly here with the sauce and the vegetables. So I'm going to get my 1 tablespoon of butter ready to go. And my tomatoes. All sorts of good smells coming, I think, from that basil that's chopped up, and then the garlic powder on here and everything. And really, really nice smells coming from here. And I do these fairly regularly, these cooking sessions. So, and we've done some more complicated things in the past. But this time, like I said before, I don't know if you saw the beginning, but I wanted to keep things fairly simple. Since it's such warm weather, I didn't want to be turning the oven on or doing anything where we're going to have to be cooking a laborious amount of time over our stoves and sweating. As it is, I'm hot, so probably going to give this maybe 1 more minute. Some of these are cooking faster than others. And the chicken is going to go back in for another 2 minutes with the sauce at the end. So, I mean, I think you still want to make sure this is cooked through, but there is a little bit of wiggle room at the end of the process here. Yeah. Looking good. Yeah, this side's looking much nicer because my pan was hot when I when I turned it. But I think these are good. I'm gonna do a quick little double check. I know this is not, I should be an expert cook where I can tell if the chicken's cooked, but I'm not. So, okay, my chicken's looking good. So just putting these on a plate. Probably just set it aside. It's not going to be super long, but you can, of course, cover it if you want to keep it warm. I do have a cat who would absolutely love to steal this chicken, so I think I'm going to throw it in my microwave here, so he does not get to it before, because he is full of mischief and he has stolen whole pork chops before. And that was upsetting. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna put my chicken in my microwave here so that stays fairly warm and cat free. Next, we're throwing in our tablespoon of butter. I'm gonna lower the heat. I had it up a little bit more toward medium high. I'm putting it back down toward medium here. There's my butter. Yeah, it's really hot. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to throw in my asparagus. And saute that for a little bit. We don't need these to be deeply, deeply cooked. You know, I don't want them to be limp. Checking on my pasta over here. My pasta's close. It's not quite there, but it's close. A little extra asparagus. Okay, and then the next thing we're gonna do is add our cream cheese. So you want to get that ready. 8 ounces of cream cheese is what we're looking for. So 8 ounces is just this block of cream cheese. I'm going to cut it up, I think, before I throw it in. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to melt. So pardon me while I'm just going to cube that up a little bit. I'm just over here cutting my cream cheese up into slightly smaller bits because it just wants to get heated up. So pardon me while I am hidden. Okay, that doesn't need to be precise. My hands are covered in cream cheese, so pardon me for a second. I had my cream cheese sitting out this whole time, so it got a little melted. So we're good. Okay, I think this is looking good. I'm gonna throw the cream cheese in. And then after that, you're gonna add the water, the pesto, and then the 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. So we're looking at a 1/2 cup of water. Here's my 1/2 cup. I'm just getting everything prepared. Okay, I'm putting in my cream cheese, which is clumping together, so I don't know how effective it was to cut it up, but whatever. We're working with what we got. On that pasta again. Pasta's perfect. Dumping that out. Let's throw some cold water on there. Okay, and I'm just gonna let that sit until That's ready. So I'm going to throw the half a cup of water in to help that cream cheese melt. And my pesto. And if you're going to be throwing in any extra seasonings like crushed red pepper, additional garlic powder, anything like that, this is probably a good moment for that. And we're going to be putting in our cherry tomatoes and our Parmesan cheese as well. So let me just let this mix through a little bit before I throw that in. Okay. Tomatoes and Parmesan cheese. Now, fresh grated probably would have been delightful here, but I just bought the already grated stuff because that's the zone I am in today. Make sure my other burner is off. So I think the biggest thing here is just sort of letting those tomatoes cook down a little bit and then letting that cream cheese melt down. Heat on medium until sauce is well blended and smooth. So yeah, we're just letting this hang out. And I want those tomatoes to soften up, helping the cream cheese get down a little bit too. And then all that good chicken stuff is getting incorporated into the sauce too. And then depending on the consistency of your pesto and how thick this is turning out to be, you could probably throw in a little more water if you need. I'm going to wait and see if it needs it. I don't think it's a little thick right now, but it might just be because the cream cheese is not fully melted down. So I'm going to give it a sec before I do anything with that. Then I'll also give it a taste to see if there's any additional spices I want to throw in there. I'm just dying to throw some crushed red pepper in here. But I know my 5-year-old will tell me it's too spicy, so I won't. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to throw just a tiny bit more water in there. Not even a quarter cup, just a little bit. Because it's looking a little thick for my preferences. I think it'll probably thicken up even more as it heats, so. All right, I'm going to grab a little spoon so I can give that sauce a taste and see if there's anything else I want to throw in there. That's actually really good. I think I'm going to throw a tad bit pepper in here just to give it a little more oomph because it's very rich, because you've got the cheese that's in the pesto itself. You added some extra cheese and we have the cream cheese. So feel like it needs a little something to kind of cut some of that richness. But I also think that once those tomatoes cook down and you get a little bit more of that acidity in there, that'll help with that as well. So I think I'm just going to give this maybe a few more minutes. The tomatoes are still pretty uncooked. And yeah, just be cautious with stirring because you don't want this to burn. Sticking a little. Just lower my heat just a bit. I'm going to grab some water again. Where'd my water go? Here it is. So I think from here, you know, it's just a matter of preference on how much you want those tomatoes to cook down. So, you know, you can kind of stop at any point, test how you're liking that. And once they're at the point that you're happy with, you could just throw, all we're going to do is throw our chicken back in there, heat for another 2 minutes, and then serve it over our penne. You can mix it all together if you prefer. Or just do individual bowls and serve it over. Or individual plates. So you can feel free to stick with me till the end here. I'm just going to be stirring to make sure my sauce isn't sticking. But I think for me, I want those tomatoes to cook down a bit more. I'm lowering my heat a little bit more toward like medium low because I think that cream can really easily burn. But I'm going to give it probably about another 5 minutes before I throw my chicken back in there. So feel free to stick with me. I think I'm just going to mute myself so you don't have to hear me endlessly chattering. But yeah, I'm just going to give it another couple minutes here and then throw my chicken in. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
If you didn't want to use chicken, because I have a friend who doesn't eat chicken, could I put in shrimp or would you put in cod?
Yeah.
What are alternatives?
I think this would be really good with shrimp. I wish I'd thought of that actually. That sounds really good. Yeah. I know like shrimp is excellent with pesto, in my opinion. So I think that would probably be the best alternative over otherwise you could even do like salmon or something like that, but I think shrimp would probably be the best. Yeah, and I'm glad I have that extra basil because like this is just turning out to be a pretty rich and creamy dish, which is going to be delicious. It's just going to be very heavy, so it'll be nice to have some of that extra freshness in there. So yeah, I'm going to give it another 4 minutes or so.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Would you ever add white wine to thin it rather than water?
I think you could. I was almost going to use chicken broth instead. And I know that's usually used pretty interchangeably. Like chicken broth can be subbed for white wine in a lot of recipes. So I think that would probably turn out just fine. As long as you're doing it, you know, fairly early on in the recipe and letting it cook down. In fact, I'm going to throw in a little bit more. This is really thickening up quite a bit, to be honest with you. Where did my, oh, here we go. I'm going to throw in just a tiny bit more water. Yeah, normally I don't like to throw in water to thin things because I always feel like things get kind of bland, but this, I bought this particular brand of pesto before and I know how flavorful and intense it is, so I wasn't too worried about it. But yeah, if you wanted to do a chicken broth or a wine, I think it would be really good. All right. I'm putting my pepper away before I get myself in trouble here. Yeah, normally I wouldn't worry about so constantly stirring a sauce, but again, this looks, and I've been lucky, this hasn't burned at all, but I can tell if I left it alone, this would definitely be sticking to the bottom of my pan. And then another serving suggestion for this dish in the recipe was to serve it alongside some bread. So if you ever wanted to make like a garlic bread or something alongside this, it would probably be really good, or even just like a nice roll or something like that would be really good with this. I'm going to test one of my tomatoes. I'm going to do it off screen because I know this is going to be incredibly hot. I'm going to stand over my sink 1 second. It's really good. That's perfect. I'm going to throw my chicken back in. Yeah, if I were to make this again, I think I would just have the cherry tomatoes. This recipe didn't call for that, but I think it would just make it cook down a little bit more. And I kind of like when the tomato in something like this sort of incorporates a little bit more. This is my first time ever making this along with you guys. So I think that's what I would do. If the next time I make this, I'm gonna just kind of put those cherry tomatoes in half. So from here, basically you're just serving. So we have our tomato salad in the fridge. I'm gonna put that alongside. It says to kind of just let this hang out for about 2 minutes, so that chicken gets nice and warm again. I'm gonna throw in some of my fresh basil that I cut up. And then you could do this on individual plates if you prefer. I'm just gonna do it like this. I'm probably gonna end up making this not very pretty and just throw my pasta in and mix it all together because it makes it easier to serve everybody. And then I have my another 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese that we're throwing in here. And I'm going to mix that in, but I might even just throw a little extra on each individual's plate. But this is looking good. So we're pretty much done. So all you can do is from here, just serve it alongside your delightful tomato salad, which I'm excited about. And you're all set. So if you have any questions, if you missed this, if you're going to be, if you didn't cook it alongside with me today and you're going to be returning to it, this has been recorded, so we can email it to you. Let me know. You should have my contact info. It's just summer.blake@surfcity-hb.org, which is hard to remember, but it's in the email that I sent you. So if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope that you enjoy your dinner. All right. Anybody have any questions before I sign off?
Thank you, Summer. Good recipe.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.